The thing about Joe Rogan, he doesn't do polite. He doesn't do royal etiquette. He does raw, unfiltered, and right now, he's done with Meghan Markle. You go on Oprah, you drop bombs, you say you're out, and now you're crawling back to Charles. Joe's voice cut through his podcast studio like a cold blade through soft fabric. You left the palace in flames, and now you're broke, begging for a fire blanket from the man you torched. The room laughed, but Joe didn't, because behind the laughter was something heavier. Embarrassment, not for himself, for them. It wasn't a British tabloid. It wasn't a palace leak. It wasn't even a disgruntled former staffer. It was Joe Rogan, America's mic'd-up mirror, and he had finally turned that mirror toward the Sussexes. What it reflected, not royalty, just desperation. They're not villains, just messy influencers in royal cosplay, he quipped. And that line, that one roasted observation, did more damage than a month of Daily Mail headlines ever could. Because it wasn't fueled by British resentment, it was American cringe, the kind of cultural secondhand embarrassment reserved for reality show meltdowns and late-stage PR spirals. For years, Meghan crafted a narrative escape, rebirth, truth-telling. She and Harry were the ones who walked away with heads high and Netflix contracts in hand. They were going to redefine royalty, from Montecito with matcha. But now, as whispers grow louder that their $100 million Netflix deal is dead, that Spotify pulled the plug, and that their brand is buckling under lifestyle flops, there's another whisper that they want back in. Not into Buckingham Palace, but into the financial stability that being adjacent to the crown once gave them. And Joe Rogan, he hears that whisper, and he doesn't need a royal aide to call it out. You're not broke because you left the royals. You're broke because you thought fame was fungible, and it turns out so is loyalty. His tone wasn't angry, it was clinical. A dissection of a brand, of a persona, of a strategy that was supposed to disrupt the monarchy, but now can't even disrupt the top 10 on Netflix. And in the middle of all this, one name remained untouched, Charles. Not because he intervened, but because he didn't have to. Joe said it best. Even her dad replied, Charles silent, and that silence is the coldest response you can get. Joe's roast wasn't malicious, it was merciless. Because he represents something Meghan fears more than palace whispers, a public that no longer believes. A public that once applauded her escape and now winces as she circles back in borrowed humility and badly veiled desperation. What makes this sting? It's not that Joe called her out, it's when he did it. At the precise moment the world is reevaluating what the Sussex brand really means. Empowerment or entitlement with better lighting? Joe didn't answer that. He just left the question hanging between takes like smoke in a sound booth. And Meghan for once didn't have a camera ready or a scripted line to catch it. This wasn't a royal takedown, it was a cultural one. A reality check from the country that once embraced Meghan as its new American princess. Now she's the former duchess with too many pitches and not enough listeners. And when Joe Rogan, the last man who'd care about palace drama, says, "This looks pathetic," you know the spotlight isn't just moving away, it's burning on its way out. Joe Rogan may have lit the match, but the fire was already smoldering. Behind every roast is a pile of receipts, and the Sussexes have amassed quite the bonfire. In 2020, Netflix handed them a reported $100 million deal. It was headline gold, exiled royals go Hollywood. Promises were made, documentaries, impactful content, royal insight with a humanitarian twist. But 5 years later, what remains a docuseries few remember, a podcast deal that imploded, and a lifestyle brand that couldn't get out of soft launch mode. With Love Meghan, a show meant to signal Meghan's post-royal renaissance, flopped so hard, it didn't crack Netflix's top 300 in the first half of 2020. Harry's Invictus project critically okay, commercially invisible. Insiders now whisper that the deal is dead in spirit, even if the contract technically ends in late 2025. Netflix is just waiting for the credits to roll, said one source. No renewal, no rescue, just retreat. And amid this collapse, one figure remains untouched, unbothered, unmoving: King Charles. Not a word, not a gesture, not even a leaked aid quote. Just nothing, the kind of nothing that freezes a room. Rumors swirl that Meghan and Harry tried to initiate peace talks with royal aides offering olive branches disguised as luxury jams and lifestyle goods. Charles didn't bite. Because when the crown learns you trade titles for trademarks, it learns not to answer your call. Joe Rogan's words may have stung, but Charles's silence, it burns slow. Because the public now sees what the palace has likely known for months. That the Sussex brand is crashing and there's no royal parachute coming to soften the fall. It's not personal, it's structural. The monarchy survives because it doesn't flinch. And Charles, in the wake of his health concerns, has grown colder, sharper, less forgiving. A king who doesn't need to slam doors. He just never opens them again. Harry and Meghan aren't just broke, they're exposed. Because nothing says we need you like sending a product basket to the man you once accused of institutional cruelty. And nothing says I heard you like not responding at all. Charles's silence isn't neglect, it's discipline. The monarch doesn't speak to failing brands, he outlives them. And in doing so, he reminds everyone, the palace, the press, the public, that legacy isn't earned through views. It's inherited and defended. So while Joe Rogan roasts them, Charles doesn't lift a finger. Because why extinguish a fire that burns the very myth they built? Once upon a time, Meghan Markle curated her own spotlight. She choreographed interviews like stage plays. She framed headlines like punchlines with herself as the misunderstood heroine. She spoke. The world listened. She paused. The press speculated. She smiled, and the cameras drank it in. But now the cameras still roll. The audience still watches. They're just laughing. Not in cruelty, in disbelief. Because how do you go from royal rebel to Netflix casualty in 5 years flat? How does the woman who claimed to reclaim her voice now flinch every time a microphone opens near a podcast studio? Joe Rogan didn't create this fall, he simply narrated the moment the curtain dropped on a performance that forgot to change acts. The royal exile turned global influencer has turned through slow PR erosion into the very thing she once exposed, a walking contradiction with nowhere left to pivot. Once Meghan broke the internet with a wedding veil and a side glance. Now she trends because Spotify executives call her not a team player. Once she was the face of modern royalty. Now she's a meme for corporate flop era. The brand was built on control, media savvy, feminist charm, Hollywood lighting. But the cracks show. Because a brand built on grievance must constantly feed on conflict. And when the enemies run out, it starts to eat itself. Critics once feared to touch her. Now comedians roast her. TikTok parodies her. Reddit dissects her. And worst of all, the silence from fans. The audiences who once reposted her quotes, bought the candles, defended every word. Now scroll past. Not in anger, but in boredom. The press didn't cancel Meghan. The spotlight simply shifted to newer voices, fresher causes, less rehearsed trauma, because vulnerability is compelling until it becomes content. Then it becomes currency, and then it inflates. She didn't lose the crowd, she just overspent their empathy, and now the public doesn't boo. They blink, they nod, they move on. When you once ruled the narrative and now you're the subject of podcast punchlines and PR postmortems, it's not a fall from grace, it's a fade into irrelevance. And the most tragic part? No one's even throwing tomatoes, they're just not buying tickets anymore. Meghan Markle built an empire out of words, carefully chosen, professionally lit, strategically placed, but now it's the absence of words that undoes her. Not hers, his. King Charles has said nothing. No interview rebuttals, no palace press briefings, no carefully leaked counter-narratives. Just a monarch dealing with a health crisis surrounded by duty and covered in silence. And yet that very silence has become louder than anything Meghan could publish. Because when even your own drama no longer earns a royal footnote, you begin to drift. Not into disgrace, but into disconnection. Once Meghan's every word felt like a challenge to the crown, now her every move feels like it never reached them. The Queen once said, "Never complain, never explain." Charles doesn't need to say it, he lives it. And Meghan, she's been explaining for 5 years straight. Explaining her exit, explaining the interviews, explaining the intent, explaining the pain. And the more she explains, the more Charles simply says nothing. Which in the theater of monarchy is the most devastating line you can deliver. Because silence, when intentional, becomes a weapon. It isolates, it delegitimizes, it renders the loud glaringly uninvited. And Meghan, with all her production deals and platform tiers, now finds herself orbiting a story that no longer pulls her in. She didn't fall out of favor, she just fell out of relevance. Charles didn't push her, he just didn't reach. And in royal logic, that's enough. Because to be royal is not to scream, it is to wait. And while Meghan chased narratives, Charles became the still point to which the world recalibrated. Unmoving, unflinching, unwilling to re-engage with a brand that mistook content for consequence. In the quiet rooms of Sandringham or the garden walks of Balmoral, no one's asking, what will Meghan say next? They're asking, what else is there to say? And in that question, Meghan disappears. Not in scandal, but in the indifference of a king who's already outlived the noise. So here we are, 5 canvases deep, a podcast host cracked the facade, a $100 million deal faded in silence, the spotlight dimmed, replaced by side-eye and slow scrolls. And the king, he simply stayed still. No public exile, no final blow, just absence. Measured, chilling, royal. Meghan Markle didn't leave the stage, she was left behind. And for someone who once owned every beat of the narrative, every angle of the camera, that might be the loudest fall of all. Because the danger isn't being canceled, it's being uninvited. It's when the mic stays on and the crowd disperses. So now the battlefield isn't royal corridors, it's public perception. And it's time to choose. Are you with Team Meg, the comeback queen who insists her truth was misheard? Or Team Charles, the Ice King, who outwaits every storm by refusing to dance in it? Or maybe Team Mirror, where people like Joe Rogan hold up the glass and ask the one question Meghan's team never rehearsed for. What if we're just not buying it anymore? Meghan once weaponized silence. Now she's haunted by it. Because when power shifts, it doesn't always come with an announcement. Sometimes it comes with a shrug and the sound of millions turning their attention somewhere else. Drop your side in the comments. Team Narrative through Team Ice King, the Team Rogan, the Team Nanaimo over it. Because this isn't just a royal feud, it's a cultural pulse check. And your scroll is your verdict.